Hello and welcome to a live kerfuffle break on Deep Program with Carrie Smith. I'm your host, Carrie. If you are a new viewer, this is a live show we do Mondays and Fridays. We usually just hang out with friends, talk about what's in the news. Today, we're going to shake it up a little bit. I'm very excited to get to interview and talk with Matthew Azraeli. Damn it, I said it wrong. Matthew Azraeli, who is the founder of the Post Millennial. Many of you are very familiar with the Post Millennial. He's also the founder of a brand new company called Bass Records, which is a music label that is trying to provide an alternative for musicians, a non-woke alternative. Please welcome Matthew. Matthew, I'm so sorry. I asked you how to say it and then I did it wrong.
No, it's okay. It's not a common name. It's Azraeli, but it's fine.
Azraeli.
Yeah.
Matthew Azraeli. Well, thank you for joining us today, for hanging out on Deprogrammed. I'm excited to talk to you because in the past couple years, as people have started, I think, waking up to what woke is or social justice or whatever you want to call it, there have been more and more people. I've seen more and more people, old friends of mine who at first didn't know what was happening to me, but now they've come over as well and said, yeah, there's something crazy going on. And so I think that we're starting to reach a cultural consensus that there's something wrong with woke, but we're still lagging behind in providing alternatives. And we've started to see some of those emerge when it comes to comic books. Eric July has a very successful comic book that's, a non-woke alternative. We're starting to see it with TV shows and films. And in this music space, though, I haven't really seen any kind of pushback yet. And so I'm very excited to talk to you about what you're doing with Bass Records. That's a long intro, but can you tell me a little bit about yourself for anyone who's not familiar with you? Let's start with, who are you and how did you come to found the Post Millennial?
Thanks so much, Carrie. So my name is Matthew. I'm Canadian. I'm actually Canadian American. I started the Post Millennial in Montreal in 2017. In July, I met a guy named Ali for Korean barbecue. That place is defunct. It's one of those spaces where they keep trying new restaurants and the restaurants never succeed for whatever reason. And back then it was a Korean barbecue place. Now I think it's an all you can eat sushi spot. But the point is, we got together and he had been trying to start a conservative site for a couple of years at that point. And I just got interested in the space following a very bizarre interaction I had with somebody who used to be a very dear friend of mine. And that was it. We both put $100 into a bank account, and that covered the first couple months of servers, and we were off, and that's how we founded the company. And now it's one of the bigger conservative websites out there. At the time that I sold it, I mean, again, we had incredible people like Andy No working for us, Libby Emmons,
I love
who
Libby.
yeah, and Libby really started out with us as well. And before I left, she became our editor in chief, and she's really fantastic. And of course, Mia Cathell or Mia Capel. Man, Mia, if you watch this, I'm really sorry. I never had a full conversation because you never talk to a person that say, well, I mean, if I were talking to you, I'd say, hey, Carrie Smith. I mean, that's
You
not
don't say,
difficult to
yeah, the
pronounce.
full name.
But I'm not yeah, I'm not saying your full name. Typically, I don't. That was the whole. Anyway, that's the whole issue with fantasy and sci-fi, right? Everybody's talking to each other, referring to them by their full names or something. It's so preposterous. But anyway, Mia's great, and she's working with Town Hall now as well. She actually exposed that pedophile ring in Georgia, the
Oh,
LGBT pedophile ring for
I
Town
just read
Hall.
about this weekend. That's how I know her name. Oh, how
Yes.
disgusting. I haven't quite processed all of that story yet.
Oh, yeah, that's extremely upsetting. But she is a really consummate journalist, and she got her start with us. After graduating from university, she worked with, the whole team, and I'm extremely proud of her and her work. I think she's amazing. And then, we have other people who are really great who are either alumni or they're still working with us. Too many to name, and I'm not sure if they would all like me. Some of them would like me, some of them, mixed bag. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
You
there
really
you go.
you guys just came together, you had a drive to start this company because you said of some kind of woke interaction with a friend, and you just put a
Yeah,
couple $100 in a bank account and were like, "Let's start a conservative news site."
that's basically right. And initially, we wrote about Canadian politics. We actually wrote exclusively about Canadian politics until perhaps, that was July 2017, until perhaps January 2019, December 2018. That's when we started experimenting more with American content. And then, of course, we were given we really exploded in 2020, right? Because we had the riots, the summer of love,
Mhm.
whatever you want to call that, following George Floyd, what happened to him. And we happened to have people in all of the major cities where riots were really taking over the entire city,
Mhm.
right? So we had Ari Hoffman in Seattle, where Chaz was becoming a thing, and then of course we had Andy in Portland. So we really looked like we were all over the place. But in reality, we
Yeah.
were just very lucky with placement, right? We even had a guy in Minneapolis at one point, right? Just pure coincidence. And so, that's the funny thing, right? We just got very lucky. Uh, as any successful business venture works, I've spoken to a lot of people uh, who are fans or even detractors. At the end of the day, everybody can agree that they would rather be lucky than good, and that's the long and short of it.
Rather be
So
lucky than good. I have to think about that for a minute, if that's true for me. I don't know. But I'd rather be both.
yeah, yeah. Both is good. Both is good. We're not all lucky enough to be good. Hopefully, we can be lucky enough to be lucky, right?
Yeah.
So
So you did all this you're very young. I won't say your age in case you're trying to keep it on the
nah,
down low, but you've done all of this, you're very young, and now you're starting your second company, second venture, Based Records. Tell me a little bit about the impetus for this, because you yourself are a musician.
yeah, that's right. My wife used to joke with me that my entire business was just a frustrated tangent where I was ignoring music and pretending I had no interest in music. And, she was completely right. My wife is brilliant, and my wife knows me very well. Um, and look, the principle is this: there are people in country music who are fundamentally alienated from mainstream American culture. There are people who produce country music, write the songs, people who listen to country music. And at the same time, country music, of all of the so-called, I don't really want to call it a dissident art form, but
Mhm.
let's say an art form that exists to serve a specific audience that is outside of the purview of big capital, right? I mean, you could call it. I mean, frankly, you could call it capital. Let's just take. Let's just follow Lenin or Marx, and let's just talk. Maybe they had some not some great arguments, but maybe they were good at prognosticating and describing things. The issue is that, of course, that the all of the money is concentrated in New York and Los Angeles, and to
Mhm.
an extent, the Bay Area, and as a result, you have studios that are making content for people who live in, Los Angeles in a 1 or 2 bedroom condo, right? They don't have kids. They certainly don't own a gun. They don't go outside
Mhm.
and enjoy the outdoors, right? They have their iced coffee. I'm a big iced coffee guy myself, but I use real milk, because I'm a
You
contrarian, right?
Have you ever seen that?
Um,
I'm gonna interject, which is the funny. Did you ever
no,
see
please.
that meme of God talking to the angel, and the angel's like, they're down there making milk out of almonds, and God's like, I gave them like 6 animals to make milk from. He's like, and the angel's like, yeah, they don't like that milk.
I don't like it. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?
So
You
you're a
can't
real
please them
milk
all.
guy. You're a real
I'm
milk
a.
guy,
I
but
suppose I could go for some milk alternatives. Macadamia milk is pretty great. It's very smooth. I don't
yeah,
know,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
But the idea is that a lot of this money is coming from a very specific source for people who have a very specific worldview. In Canada, as an example, we recognized this problem right away when we were confederating because we have a French Canadian province. They literally speak a different language. They literally followed a different kind of Christianity. They were Catholics relative to the Protestant English side. And as a result, we have certain carve outs in Canadian law, which are very amusing, which all pertain to protecting French law, the French language, the civil legal code, the Catholic school boards of Ontario, for example, right? But in America, you never really had that. You have so many people living in the United States. They broadly, I mean, people live together, they work together, they participate economically with each other, but they're so fundamentally different in their outlook. And the
Yes.
reason that I'm getting into country music is because, quite frankly, people are better inoculated here against the kind of, if you, I know you call it woke, it could also be called SJW. In the past, I think the best description was political correctness.
Yeah.
This is fundamentally an urban kind of mental parasite, if we want to call it that, right? This ideological outlook, which is highly dogmatic, which is materialist, but still fundamentally religious in structure, right?
Yes.
Whatever. So, people here, they genuinely believe in God, right? That was a big thing for me as well, I'm Jewish, for example, right? So, becoming a genuine God believer, right? Inoculating yourself against a religion with another religion, right?
Yes.
So
It
people have that here.
it definitely functions as, I don't, you probably don't know my whole story, but I was in social justice for about 2 decades, and coming out of it was a long process. It's not like an overnight waking up. It was a couple years really of figuring out what I really thought about things. And once you get out of it though, you can, hindsight's 2020, you can look back at it much which much more clear kind of vision and say, yeah, it did function as a religion for me. And for people who are still in it, I think a lot of times they can't see that. It's like the fish can't see the water. It's all around them. They can't see all of
That's
the
right.
the dogmatic stuff that they participate in, the ritualistic stuff, the liturgy, the way they repeat things, almost like liturgy. And um, did you ever, just about you? I'm just curious. Were you ever politically, like, what has your trajectory been? Have you ever been swayed by woke, or were you always a conservative? Or
That's a great question. I mean, when I was 12, I was always somewhat precocious. When I was 12, I read the Communist Manifesto, and I was really
12?
committed yeah, I was into Marx and I was into Kafka. That was me
Okay.
expressing my angst. And,
So you
I
got it
still
out of the
love
way
Kafka.
early, like way early.
Yeah, that's the issue, and then I couldn't. And by the way, they would send. But you see, that's the thing. Like a true Marxist, even, is not let's say woke, right? Because woke is actually very particular, in my opinion, to English speaking North America, and of course,
Mhm.
all of the American dependencies, right? So the European Union, and England now, right? And in Australia, New
New
Zealand,
Zealand.
right? If you speak English, right, you're going to be influenced very much by this ideology. But as an example, in Quebec, there are many people who only speak French. And as a result, yes, there are many far left positions that exist in Quebec that are very popular. However, it isn't a dogmatic, concrete belief system with all of the same point by point. I know what my opinion is on everything from gun control to abortion to gay rights to trans rights. It isn't so consistent actually in
Mm.
Quebec or even in other formerly Catholic European countries that are not necessarily English speaking,
English
right? Like
speaking.
Portugal, right? So it's really an English language, problem, right? Which is why, interestingly enough, if you, uh, the funny thing about the Quebecois is in the 60s, we had a terrorist movement, the FLQ, right? And the FLQ, of course, they sent letter bombs to people's houses, and they actually killed a deputy labor minister. So they were real terrorists. And so I hesitate to say the funny thing about them, but there is a funny thing about them, which is that ideologically they believed that English-speaking Canadians were the devil, and that the Anglo-American model, that culture, the Anglo-American Protestant culture, was fundamentally an evil, acerbic, corroding moral force. And over time, I've started to sympathize with them, right? Or with the Amish, for example.
With the
You know,
Amish?
yeah, well, the Amish, what they call non-Amish people, actually. This
No,
is
I
something
don't.
I've read. Something I've read, not something that I've seen with my own eyes. But apparently the term is English,
Oh, I think I have heard that they call them English.
right? Because they speak Platt Deutsch, right? So that's kind of the interesting thing, right? If I look at the Amish or the Quebecois as North American people groups, right,
Mhm.
that fundamentally differentiate themselves from English-speaking Protestant culture, it's the language. It really is.
Oh, I haven't really thought about it as, I guess I have thought about it as being an English-speaking thing. I guess the word I've used more often is in the Western world, but if you go to, from what I've heard anyway, if you go to an Asian country like China, or people are talking about in the chat, I think I saw scroll by China or Korea or whatever, like woke isn't a thing. They don't
No,
have
not really.
Marxism is a thing, but it doesn't express itself in this identity group way, like in the way. So Marxism, the way I try and talk about it with people who ask, like out in the real world, like, what do you do and what do you talk about? If they don't know what I mean when I say woke, it's like, if you think of Marxism as being a belief system that says the best way to view the world is as a competition between class groups, and we have to redistribute the wealth in order to make everyone equal. Well, woke is similar, but it says no, the best way to view the world is as a competition between identity groups. So it centers identity and power instead of wealth and class. It says we have to redistribute power between these identity groups. So my point is, I think in the Asian countries you'll still get Marxism, but it's not this new mutated identity group kind of Marxism.
Well,
Would you say that?
so yeah, so actually, let me follow up on that, and I'll give you my take. Because of course, Jordan Peterson and others have pioneered this idea that Marxism somehow turned into wokeism, right, or
Mhm.
whatever this is.
Like
But
mutated.
mutated, yeah. But in my opinion, this is actually something that can draw its roots intellectually to the Industrial Revolution in England, primarily
Okay.
with three thinkers. Okay, Bentham, Malthus, and Darwin, right? Um, and of course, after the Summer of Love, you had all of these statues that were taken down and destroyed and burned. But Charles Darwin, if you go into the British Museum of Natural History, you have a huge bust of Darwin. He's sitting in the chair, right? And it was, his ideas were principally used as a form of apologia for what was, at the end of the day, a highly I don't know, like just evil form of capitalist exploitation, right? The racism and so on of our time. But that stems from Darwin. We still, kiss the feet of Darwin, intellectually speaking, right? So, in my opinion, you know, and I guess we'll have to back up in terms of, like, what do I believe and all of this. But just to explain it very succinctly, Jeremy Bentham, the idea of utilitarianism, the idea that whatever you do, as long as it increases the amount of hedons, literally a unit that he tried to develop, saying, okay, this is how we express happiness. We express it in hedons. All right, like kind of an
Okay.
absurd, non-human, whatever. And again, I'm vastly oversimplifying because we only have so much time. Then there was Malthus, right? Malthus, but Bentham, his idea was basically just hedonism, right? Just explicit hedonism, right?
Oh, and that's why I call it hedons?
Yeah, that's why he called it hedons. Exactly.
Okay.
That's why he called it hedon. And
You'll
that's the
have to,
utility.
I'm very ignorant about him, so please explain it to
No,
me in the for dummies way.
well,
Yeah.
basically, Bentham was perhaps I want to describe him in a mean-spirited way. He was a philosopher, he was a philosopher in England around this time, the turn of the Industrial Revolution. I can't remember the exact, his period of his life, but his principle was this: the utilitarianism. Basically, as long as it increases the net amount of happiness in the world, it's a good thing, right?
Okay.
Personal
But there's a lot
responsibility
of
be
loopholes
damned.
there. I mean, you could argue a lot of really what I would call morally evil things increase the happiness for the people who are committing them. So,
Exactly. Well, and by the way, but this is the same thought that is found, for example, in Canada, where in British Columbia we had heroin vending machines. I think we might still have those, right?
wow.
Because if you're a heroin addict, you shouldn't get smacked off the street. You could have a dirty needle, and you can get, God forbid, hepatitis or HIV, and that could end up increasing the costs in our health system. And so, but you still really love heroin. So how about, instead of us trying to fix you or help you or give you some real services, we just give you heroin from a vending machine? It's really, or needles. I don't think the heroin is. Well, maybe it is actually. I'm not sure. I can't remember the specifics. Is it the heroin and the needles? Are they in separate vending machines? Now
Right.
I'm curious. Do you have to hire like somebody who's a vendor, like of a Coca-Cola machine? This is what I think about because I'm so business oriented. But so anyway, but there's that guy. Then there's Malthus, and Malthus had a wonderful single essay, just one essay, and I was just reading it the other day, and I'm terrible with book titles, but Malthus's idea is essentially that there are too many people, right?
Okay.
And that we need to maintain a healthy population so that we avoid overcrowding, and so that we can maintain a civilized society, right? Although, funnily enough, with Malthus, he had predicates, two predicate ideas for the ideology. The first was that we won't be able to grow more food, because another thing he was worried about was mass starvation.
Okay.
Right? There's this guy, Paul Ehrlich, I think, who's been repeatedly wrong over and over and over again. In the 70s, he predicted a population collapse because we wouldn't have enough food, as an example, before
Yes.
nitrogen fertilizer started really kicking into gear. And, Malthus was really the first guy to say, man, we really need to stop having kids. We need to stop creating people. Isn't that so terrible? And that's an idea, by the way, that persists today, right?
Today.
That's the I hate to bring up Davos, because I actually don't think Davos is very important. I don't think the WEF, for example, is very important. And I think that we on the right fixate on very particular congregations and very particular meetings as if they mean anything. But the fact of the matter is that I'll tell you why I disagree with that in just a moment.
Okay.
But that's Malthus, right? And then finally, of course, you have Darwin.
Wait,
right? And
before you move
Darwin.
on, you said
Sorry.
in Malthus, he
Oh,
basically
the
was saying
second thing.
the second thing, yeah.
Yeah, the second thing was that the relationship, the passions between the sexes would remain unchanged, right? That men and women would still love each other and just want to make babies and so on, right?
Okay.
And that has changed, actually, not only in birth control, but just in the fact that he had what we would call a heteronormative outlook, which was of course the default civilizational outlook for the entire period of time, from when Malthus was alive to before him in all of recorded history, right?
Did he think that was a bad thing, that it would remain unchanged? Because he thought there were too many people. Did he think it was a bad thing that
Yeah,
so-called heteronormativity existed?
Right. He wanted extra governmental solutions, specifically because he believed that we were just too horny. We were just going to keep going after each other. We were going to keep getting it, as it were. All right. And this is my colloquial, whatever distillation. But the point is, he
Right.
thought we were going to keep banging. He thought we were going to bang our way into starvation, which, by
Okay.
the way, has never happened. It doesn't even animals don't do that, right? If you're a colony of, I don't know, if you've got a bunch of penguins, the penguins aren't going to start out reproducing, right, relative to the food supply,
Relative to
right?
the resources.
Right. If birds don't have enough to feed their young, then they're not going to mate that season, right? So it doesn't really follow that were stupid anyway. But whatever. You have to remember, this was when zoology and so on was very primitive, and we didn't know anything about animals. But funnily enough, this idea has persisted despite being discredited time and time and time again, right? But even the actual predicates of his arguments, which are that, hey, people are going to want to bang. I mean, nobody my age or younger wants to bang anymore. Everybody's terribly afraid of the opposite sex. Okay, everybody lives in fear of the opposite sex. Okay, that's
Are
number
there
one.
studies? You're reminding me. I think I've seen studies about that.
Yes.
As sexually as sexualized as the younger generation is, and at younger and younger ages, they're actually. I think I read a study that said they're actually having a lot less sex.
Yeah. And nobody's drinking either, which is very good. I'm very anti-alcohol, but the point is, good with the
Mhm.
bad. The bad is that nobody's, I mean, in a way, it's a personal tragedy for every person involved, right? Like, if you're a woman, you want to find a committed relationship, you're going to have a very hard time doing that. If you're a man, and the same thing, it's the same issue. So in a way, that's a personal tragedy for every single point on that statistic. That's millions of people who might not find, the love of their lives, or whatever. It's very, I don't know, disenchanting. It's very sad.
Yeah.
And anyway, and then you have Darwin, right? And
Okay.
so Darwin's idea, of course, is evolution. And of course, Nietzsche has a very, I think it was in The Gay Science, where Nietzsche talks about this idea that Darwinism, much like Malthus and Malthusianism, or the Malthusian principles, these ideas are very much born out of the Industrial Revolution. And the United Kingdom, as it stood at the turn of the 19th century, thereabouts, right? A little bit before, and of course, in the entire century stemming thereafter, right? Where people left farms, they started living in extremely uh, harsh conditions. Infant mortality was sky high until they were finally able to put a cap on it. And, people were finally, but then that brought its own problems because, as Malthus said, there are too many people. People can't feed themselves. People can't take care of themselves. We have all of these orphans. We have all of this disease. What are we going to do? And so Darwin's idea of a survival of the fittest for its time is an extremely fitting idea, right?
Hmm.
And it also happened to serve as a very effective justification for, of course, slavery, colonial slavery, right? The fact that you're, by the way, or even general colonial practices in India, in Asia, obviously in the Americas as well, right? And then later on, of course, eugenics, right? All of these things, this idea of racial purity and all of these terrible ideas, in their nature, they're fundamentally progressive. What do I mean by progressive? I mean, they're based on materialism, they're based on science, so called science, right? I'm not saying
In
that to
quotes,
validate it, in
right?
quotes, right? The science of the era was racism, right? Which is why perhaps you should question the science of your given era just because a scientist thinks something, obviously within reason, right? I'm not like I'm not innately distrustful of medical professionals personally, as an
You're
example.
reminding me
Okay.
of Michael Crichton, Jurassic Park guy. His essay about. Have you ever read? He wrote this thing all about how all of the science, all the institutions, the people with the public microphone at the time, they were behind this eugenics idea.
Yeah,
And
they
he was
were.
basically saying, "Don't trust the science." Yeah.
Right. Well, and by the way, this eugenics agenda, like there are certain very evil things that happen when people don't have kids, which is why I'm a big proponent of people having kids. You know, if you look at, for example, what China is doing to the Uyghurs, right?
Mhm.
That comes from a deep-seated, even though the Han Chinese are the vast, vast, vast majority of China's population, and the Uyghurs are a tiny minority. The Uyghurs are still people of faith. They're Muslims. And so they're having families and children. They're being normal people. Okay. Unlike the Han Chinese, who are swept up in a Marxist materialist ideology. And oh man, it looks like there is no real reason to live. Why don't I just live in this condo all by myself, eat instant noodles, and then just, watch pornography all day? I get, you know what I mean? There is no compelling reason. And that's why, by the way, to sum everything up and put, or even, for example, in Canada, where we're not having any kids, especially in Quebec. And in Quebec, there's a deep seated pride in French Canadians and in French Canada. Okay. And so rather than bringing immigrants in who won't speak the language, who aren't going to assimilate as easily as they will in English Canada for many reasons. Like I'm Jewish, Jews, Italians, Greeks in Quebec are they're more similar to Jewish, Italian, Greek communities in New York in the 1920s than in the
Okay.
2020s because of the Catholic nature of the society and the fact that we're not able to assimilate as easily. And so anyway, but the fact of the matter is that because of that, because you can't accept new people and because nobody wants to have kids, I mean, you can always have kids, right? Nobody's holding a gun to your head saying, don't have kids, right? But people are choosing not to. And as a result of that, there's a big problem in Quebec where we're actually euthanizing many elderly people. We're offering MAID. We call it MAID, right? And we're offering it to Paralympians.
What does
And
it stand for?
Medical assistance in dying.
Right. I've just
And
started
we're
reading
offering
about
it.
some of this.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're made for those of us in the States who haven't researched it yet, and I'm one of those people. I've just seen a couple of articles about it, but is it true? Like you can go in and say, I'm depressed. I've had it, like,
Listen. Hold on. Don't be an alarmist. All right. You need
okay.
two doctors. You need two doctors to agree that you're really depressed. All right. So
Okay.
don't go around saying that you could just tell somebody you're depressed. All right. CBC is going to fact check you and tell everybody that you're a right wing extremist and you're lying. In fact, lady, Miss Smith, you need two doctors to help you kill yourself, and then of course the administering physician, right?
This
They
sounds a
kill you.
lot
So
like the trans and kid stuff to me, where they say, if anyone says anything about how easy it is to get children on what could be sterilizing hormones or, medicalizing the transition, that they say, oh no, they have to have gone through, this therapy first. Don't worry. And it sounds kind of similar.
in a sense it is, right? You have checks and balances that are supposed to work, but at the end of the day, a fad is a fad. Okay, mom and dad, I'm goth now. I'm emo. I'm a woman. These are all ideas, all right? These are all just, you know what I mean? So anyway, but the reason that I bring this up is basically for this reason, to answer your original question, right? Which is, did Marxism morph into wokeism, or where does wokeism come from? For me, there are three founding writers, which we talked a little bit about. Okay,
Right.
Darwin, Malthus, and Bentham, and they sort of serve as justifiers. And by the way, we still believe very much in their ideas to this day. They guide public policy to this day through various other means, through, intellectual synthesis, through recapitulations of the same old ideas, right? Somebody rewrites it in a new way, right? Like I mentioned with Paul Ehrlich relative to Malthus. But the point is that wokeism, as we see it, or in my opinion, okay, when I describe myself as center right, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a center right guy. What wokeism fundamentally is currently is it's just the manifestation of decline, of entropy, of the natural state of the universe, okay? Because everything dies. Everything dies. You can't avoid it, right? And it's a sad thing, and you wish you could stop it, but Rome fell. The Mongol Empire fell, and someday the American Empire, Pax Americana, is going to fall. Not very soon, by the way. Not as soon as people believe that it's going to fall. It's probably going to become sclerotic first, and it's probably going to become unyielding, and it's just going to adopt a very specific worldview. And near the end of its life, that'll become a sort of a dogma. We have to fight for a reasonable dogma right now, so that we can still live decent lives, and our grandchildren can. But the end result is basically this: that people naturally want to do what's easier. People don't
Mhm.
want to fight for things. They don't want to uphold anything. As an example, robbery. Compare robberies, the amount of robberies in London today to the amount of robberies that existed, and when Arthur Conan Doyle was writing Sherlock Holmes. Right, this is something I've heard before. Right, you know, they had virtually, over the course of, or compare homicides in Canada to homicides in the United States. Right, to an extent, the lack of a social cohesion in the United States, the lack of, the fact that there are certain parts of the United States that are just very dangerous to enter, right? Even relative to Canada, which has its own problems, right? People deteriorate. People show when you get a degenerative disease, you show different symptoms, right? Different
Okay.
symptoms manifest first, right? But what is the point of what I'm trying to do and what I believe? I personally believe that, as somebody who recognizes that decline is an intractable aspect of civilization and of the civilization that we're living in now, the question I want to ask is, well, what can we do to uphold the basic principles and morals and ethics of a good society? How can we decide what a good society looks like? Okay. And by the way, that's why so many on the right, for example, they say we want to go back to the 1950s. That's like a big, it's like a big
Mm.
thing, right? Why do we want to go back to the 1950s? Why not go back to the 1880s, or why not go back to
Well, the
the
music of the
Protestant?
1950s was better than the 1880s. Okay, I don't
No, yeah, no.
know.
Well, actually, it really wasn't. And
Yeah.
actually, if you compare the music of the 1880s, I mean, whatever, notwithstanding Beethoven and whatever, but if you compare that even to the 1700s, right? I mean, in a way, you can sort of see this very clear
Yeah,
decline manifest
decline.
in music first, right? You have Haydn, you have Mozart, and then, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Again, whatever. Obviously, notwithstanding Beethoven, notwithstanding even Debussy, or even Shostakovich and the great Russian composers of the Soviet era, because funnily enough, the Soviet Union, I guess, they kind of, in their weird communist way, they sort of preserved Western culture from the decline of liberal democracy a little bit longer, and so you still have some great music, classical music from the Soviet Union. But the point is that um, what I believe the right really represents is the upholding of a good life, right? A
Mhm.
life with children, a life with grandchildren, a life where you can live in a neighborhood and you can go outside at 3 a.m. for a jog if the mood strikes you, and you'll be completely safe. That's what I idealize, all right? And I don't idealize the 1950s. I don't idealize, frankly, any previous era in history. I want a world where we can all be good to each other. I want a world where we're building God's garden, like in King Solomon's hymn. We're
Yeah.
building God's garden and we're not living in the jungle. And right now, there are just a lot of weeds. And by the way, when I say weeds, I'm not talking about people. I'm not saying that there are problematic people. I'm saying there are problematic ideas. I'm saying there are problematic, perhaps, institutions and problematic incentives and there's a problematic lack of belief in the world writ large. But actually, giving the wokesters this idea that they actually believe in something is too much credit, that they are Marxists. It's too much credit. Fundamentally, they believe in nothing. So
I
that's
agree.
my that's
At
my
the end of
shtick.
the day, they think well, thank you for that. You've given me a lot to think about. But I think at the end of the day, you're right. They think they believe in something. They think they believe in, when I was in woke, it's almost like you you turn off a part of your brain. You're not really engaging in thought. You think you are, but you're repeating a lot of things, a lot of other people's ideas. And I think a lot of people who are in it, they would say, "Oh, I believe in anti-racism. I believe in this. I believe and I believe in feminism, and I believe in equality." And they think the ideology is about certain things, and I do believe it is about creating this division, supposedly in the pursuit of equity. Is redistributing power and or redistributing wealth, whatever. But at the end of the day, it is about nihilism. It comes down to, like you're saying, a belief in nothing, because it takes us to this place of anything goes. This place of, they're like, I saw Vice President Harris the other day. I saw a clip of a video with her where she was saying, we all need to end up in the same place. We need equity because we all need to end up in the same place. And first of all, I'm kind of amazed that the Vice President of the United States is openly speaking such communist ideas, in my opinion. We all need to end up in the same place. But secondly, no, like, think about what you're saying. We don't need to end up in the same place. And I think if you look throughout history, anytime we've pursued that, we all end up in the rubble. Like, it's like we all end up in the destruction, the nothingness. So I think you're right. I have another thing you made me think of. I just jotted this down. You were saying we need to be building God's garden, not living the jungle. It makes me think of my pastor. He's been doing these sermons. Well, this was a while ago now, this one sermon he did, but he was talking about how God created man to be a cultivator of culture, to be a gardener. And he was sort of talking, and I'd never really thought about the Adam and Eve story in that way before I heard him talking about that. But it's sort of, you're bringing that to mind for me, that idea that it's God is basically God is tasked man with going out and taking this chaotic jungle and crafting it into a garden. And I like that idea. I like that idea of thinking about, like, that's the purpose of man, is to create a garden of culture. So
yeah, I mean, that's what we all do. And by the way, that's a big issue with the right, because the right persists in trying to harken back to earlier cultures, as if you could dig up ancient Samaria and, rebuild the ziggurats, and everybody could just become a Sumerian priest. And if you could only divert, what are their rivers? I can't remember. Whatever, the Mesopotamian river basin. If only you could rework all the Mesopotamian rivers so that you were able to, cultivate the land in the exact same way, that everybody would be a Sumerian. Everybody would believe in Ur. Everybody would read about Gilgamesh and feel that same sense of awe and dread and everything else that the Sumerians believed. I mean, but of course that's preposterous, right? Because first of all, there are two major weaknesses of conservative. Well, there are so many. Conservative. I mean, I'm not really a conservative. I'm center right, right? But the major issue with conservatism, there are twofold, right? There's this nostalgia factor, right? And then whenever you're nostalgic for something, people can say, but what about segregation, as an example, right? Surely you disagree with segregation, etc. And it's like, yeah, I personally would have disagreed with segregation back then as well, right? Because my principles are Judaism, right? I don't believe, and by the way, it's the same thing in Christianity. There's no justification for race-based differentiation of peoples, right? But that's from Darwin, right? That's a Darwinian idea, right? By the same token, at that time, I would have been very upset about lobotomies, right? But you also have to remember that the right of that era was more substantial in its offerings. And so even though John F. Kennedy's own sister was lobotomized, that wasn't necessarily something that the Christian right was fixated on at the time. You have to remember how horrific a lobotomy is, arguably even worse than sterilizing your own offspring, okay? Because of course somebody would have to be institutionalized. They would become a ward of the state. It didn't make any sense, right? Not that our current era of overwrought medical interventions necessarily makes sense either, but whatever. At least you aren't, whatever, in a way we've come a long way with our insane medical fads, is all I'm trying to say. The point is this: in every era, we always try to go back, but it never makes any sense because you can't go back. You can't go onto the Nile River today, dig up, an ancient Egyptian king, reanimate his corpse, and then worship him as a sun god. Okay, I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen. And by the same token, You can't go back to white picket fences and all of this nonsense from the 1950s. It's just not going to happen, right? So what the right has to do is it has to be affirmative, right? The other issue that I was going to say that the right has is it doesn't have a friend enemy distinction, right? And
What do you
so
mean?
I'm a very modern. So, as an example, Elon Musk buys Twitter, right? He gets rid of these journalists, so-called journalists on Twitter that are really just attack dogs for the Democratic Party of the United States. He
Right.
gets rid of them. They're off of his platform. The journalists who used to work for me, like Libby, I love you, Libby, but whatever. We can have our disagreements, right? She said no. Elon Musk has to put Taylor Lorenz back on Twitter. Why? Why?
Uh,
Why? Because at the end of the day, that's why our hatred of hypocrisy is ultimately why we lose. Because we don't make
oh,
these fundamental friend enemy distinctions. And you could read any book from the 1800s until today. There's a wonderful book called The Red Decade by Eugene Lyons. I highly recommend everybody read it. It's about the Stalinist infiltration of the United States government, culture, and trade unions specifically. I would lay the blame for the defeat of American trade unions, not only to Reagan and right wing capitalist cronies like that, but also very much at the Stalinists' feet for weakening them on purpose. But all this guy talks about, Eugene Lyons, because he was the Moscow correspondent for an American newspaper, and he was just like that Welsh journalist Jones, who discovered that, oh my God, there's a terrible man-made famine. Stalin's murdering millions of people. This is terrible. I have to tell everybody about it, and then we'll stop supporting Stalin. Right? He thought, not the case, and it was the hypocrisy. You think that we think we might have had it bad. This man discovered millions of people were being murdered, and that the best and brightest of his era didn't care.
you didn't
Not
care.
only didn't care, still supported the guy, still raised money for Stalin. Right? Again, in many ways, things are actually better. So, the point I'm trying to make is that you have to understand the friend enemy distinction. You can't be obsessed with hypocrisy, and you also can't look at the past. You have to remember that Lot's wife looked at the past, she turned into a pillar of salt. You don't look back. Sorry.
Oh, there's no going back. You're making me think of Lost.
A
The TV
lot.
show.
Yeah.
You can't go back. You can't.
If I
I,
could go, actually, there's a rant that I want to go on regarding Lost, but if you have a question, please, you can ask it first.
let me ask you
I
a
have a
question
rant
first, and
prepared.
then you can go on a rant.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there's so much there for me to think about, and I do want to get to the details about your label. Okay, but
Sure.
first,
Oh yeah,
you're
48
saying,
minutes. We haven't really talked about that.
yeah,
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
but this is so interesting. You think that if we focus too much on hypocrisy, that's why we'll lose? I'm not sure if I agree with that, but I will have to think about it more because I actually sometimes like when I first started leaving woke, one of the quotes that really stuck out to me at the time, I was going to for the first time in my life, I was going to I started going to a spiritual center, then I was going to a Catholic church. Like I kind of went through this my own path towards God of trying different kinds of churches. But this
Hmm.
one spiritual center I was at the time, the pastor there, he quoted Nietzsche about, when you stare into the abyss stares back at you, and then be careful fighting
Hmm.
monsters because you become the monster you fight. And that really hit me. Like I thought about that for a long time about what that meant. And one of the things I took away from that is that I'm very watchful and careful, or I try to be anyway, about being a hypocrite. And I think one of the big problems in the woke left is that they are such hypocrites, is that hypocrisy is just the left has become rotten through the core with hypocrisy. And so on the right, how do you prevent that from eating through? Like if you think you're on the side of justice and righteousness, don't you have to show that in your behavior by not behaving like the monster, like the enemy, right?
So in my opinion, hypocrisy is simply a sign of power. Hypocrisy is the half-life of power, meaning that, how uranium deteriorates as a half-life and it gives off radioactive elements.
Mhm.
That's what hypocrisy is, right? Because a powerful person or a powerful institution will say one thing and then they'll do whatever the hell exists in their own interests.
But what if
So,
they did?
pardon me?
But what if they didn't? You don't think you can be powerful without engaging, without being hypocritical?
No, you can't. I don't think you can,
Wow.
unfortunately. I mean,
Okay.
no. I mean, listen, you can if you're an exceptionally good, God-fearing king, like King Solomon, and you live in an era of material surplus, and as a result, you never have to make any hard decisions, right? If you
Okay.
never have to make any hard decisions, you can live without being a hypocrite. But at the end of the day, and by the way, this is the other thing with the so-called woke left. They'll say whatever the hell they like. Vice President Harris will say whatever she needs to say to appease her base,
Of course.
right?
Yeah.
She could say we all need to end up in the same place, but at the end of the day, she still put low-level drug dealers in Californian wildernesses, making them fight forest fires. Okay, people lost their lives. They sold weed. Kamala Harris was, I think, the prosecutor, or maybe the AG of California at the time. And she said, poor men who had really done nothing. I mean, selling weed you probably should go to jail, in my opinion. Okay, I'm sorry. But you shouldn't be sent to fight a forest fire and die. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, let's just call a spade a spade. I don't think the punishment fits the crime. So she'll say whatever she says, but she's fundamentally a hypocrite because that's how she is. And by the way, on the right, as opposed to hypocrites, we have something even worse, arguably, which are grifters,
Oh,
right?
yeah. But they
Because
are
the grift,
hypocrites. But grifters are
no,
hypocrites.
no, but they're hypocrites in a very specific way. They're hypocrites in the American model, the American right-wing model, which is very much the itinerant preacher. It's the snake oil salesman in the Old
Yes.
West,
Yes, they're
right?
con
It's
men,
the
but
it's the
they use the beliefs of others, the sincere
right.
beliefs of others to gain
They
money,
might,
power, or
they
fame.
might, they might sincerely hold these beliefs. You have to remember these mega church pastors. They say, Jesus, please give me another plane. Jesus, I need another jet stream, And they might actually think that they're doing good with their jet streams. Who knows? And maybe they are. Maybe Jesus does want. Maybe, you know what I mean? Again, I'm Jewish, but maybe Jesus, he died for our sins, and also he really wants he wants Joel
Joel
Osteen to have
Osteen.
a jet.
No.
Whatever. He
That guy's
wants
a
Joel,
he's a snake oil
li-
salesman. But
listen, the ways of the Lord are inscrutable, right? Carrie, what are we gonna
wait, but
do?
let me ask you. I think I'm still having trouble wrapping my head around this. But maybe I'm mishearing you, but how do you, Matthew, protect against becoming yourself a hypocrite? Or do you think that you just you have to make hard choices and those choices require you to be
Oh,
hypocritical?
so, ultimately, I'm actually a very steady guy personally. Okay, personally, I'm a very steady guy, but I think that comes from having I have a very particular like outlook, and a lot of it stems from like just me, and you know what I mean. I can't expect other people to think things the way I think,
Mhm.
and frankly, like if I like, I'll tell you what I would have done in Musk's position. Okay, I would have spent $40 billion, and if I have to spend 40 billion fucking dollars to get rid of these activists, and who, frankly, I perceive as having destroyed my son, right? That's really the whole reason that Elon Musk got radicalized. You can look into what happened to his son, who identifies as a woman and no longer talks to him. If I were Elon Musk, $40 billion would not be a very high price to pay to get rid of Taylor Lorenz or to get rid
Mhm.
of any of these people from Twitter. It just wouldn't be, because ultimately it serves a higher good. And you have to believe in a higher good, by the way, right? In the eyes of, and then God can judge whether you're or not you're a hypocrite. I'm sorry if that makes me sound like a lunatic to most people who are God fearing, whatever. Yeah, that's fine. But I mean, look, I mean, you can even look at the Torah itself, right? I mean, King David was, appointed by God, anointed by God, and so on. But he still sent Bathsheba's husband to die on the
Right.
front lines of a battle because he wanted to bang her. So at the end of the day, you know, power serves power, and ultimately all of this seething on the right of what hypocrites everybody else is, it's just a result of us being completely powerless and being completely cowardly and unable to actually make that distinction. Now, what does that mean? Like, let's say we do see, again, seizing powers in relative terms, because I'm not actually talking about politics. I actually don't think politics is the way to change anything. I think it's culture, and this is when
Me,
I'll talk to
I
you
agree. Yeah.
about based records. Basically, you have to promote, very simply, a culture of personal responsibility, a faith based culture where people actually uphold covenants, where people say, you know, rather than drill music, promoting drill music, you know what drill music is? Like Chief Keef and that whole Chicago
Oh,
scene
yes, I've heard about it.
and O
Have
Block and everything. Yeah, listen, like the rap music, even the hip hop music of today is hyper violent, hyper glorifies violence and rape and drugs and terrible things relative to like 90s hip hop, okay? Or or you know, its origins in Brooklyn. Again, maybe that's a controversial statement, but you know that it originated in Brooklyn. But the point is, even in hip hop, we've seen a deterioration. And the point is in culture that you can see how people are influenced. You can see that you want to develop something that's positive, that tells a story, rather than something that just promotes, you know, death, destruction, hedonism, and nonsense, right? Which is literally, or, you know, hip hop now, which is literally just like a list of like my advertisers and sponsors, right?
I hate it now. I have a one of my gig jobs. My deprogrammed audience members will know this, but one of my gig jobs requires me to occasionally listen to playlists of young people, and it's I just think the rap music is just fallen off so much. Where it used to be like in the 20s, they sang about they sang about sex as well, but at least they were cheeky about it, and they were double entendres, and they were somewhat clever with the lyrics, like "Put a little sugar in my bowl," and but now it's just so unimaginative. It's literally like, "Put this body part in this body part." Okay, yeah, like
So
just,
it's like an instruction manual. In case you were sure,
yeah,
I'm
it's so
specifically talking
boring.
about, yeah, this kind of sodomy, you know,
Yeah,
and
it's like no, there's no cleverness to it at all. It's like, who wants to hear that? It's like kind of medical. But anyway, let me ask you about, because we kind of got all over the place, and I am going to come back to your lost friend at the end. But tell me about Bass Records. Like, tell me what you're trying to do. Is it just country music? Are you working with? Are you? What are you doing with Bass?
so my inspiration for bass records was the Charter 77 movement, Czechoslovakia, Václav Havel, the wonderful playwright, Czech playwright. Basically, I want to have a dissident movement that, of course, is American, and so it still makes money and it still sells
Mhm.
products and stuff like that. You know, that's the dream. All right, what can I say? Guilty of being a little greedy. Why not? The point is that, yeah, it's going to be principally country music because I'm working with so many fantastic writers, producers, songwriters. This is what I meant, by the way: songwriters, producers, engineers. There are many people in country music who um, feel completely disenfranchised, not only the listeners, but the actual producers,
Mhm.
the actual country music producers. I'm talking country music stars like John Rich and Jason Aldean, all the way down to people who drive the tour buses,
Okay.
right? You have people who drove tour buses, for example, and you know we have some info, but we're not releasing. But you know, whatever, or at least we not confirmed, but like we understand that there were tour bus drivers, cartage people, meaning people who handled the instruments in studios and at shows, who weren't vaxxed, refused to get vaccinated, and they were fired. They were let go as a result. Okay, these were union people. These were people who were working 20, 30 years or even more in this industry, and they were kicked out. You
Yeah.
know, and Nashville, by the way, is very much a union town, right? And fighting in American politics, there's a battle where both parties are fighting for the working class. Supposedly, both of them are shits. They're elite shits, right? As in, you know, sorry to swear, but the Democrats and the
Fine.
Republicans don't really have working people in mind,
No,
right? But
I
they
don't
both
think so.
claim to. right? So the Democrats will say stuff like, we need a $15 minimum wage, but then also, if you don't want this experimental vaccine, you're gone, you're fired.
Yes.
Goodbye. If you don't want to pay for your colleague's abortion, get the hell out of here, pal. So, that's kind of the issue, right? Because at the end of the day, you don't only want to work for a certain amount, you also want to be treated with dignity and respect and like a human being. Okay. And so, very simply, what we want to do in country music is we want to kind of grab the elites, right? I.e., the actual producers, the actual workers who man the studios, who do the cartage at the studios, who write the songs, who produce the records, who have the distribution, who have everything else. The idea is to use that country infrastructure, begin with country music artists, and eventually, well, not eventually, because we're talking to other non-country artists now, but to use that infrastructure, okay, to distribute and promote other, let's say canceled artists, but they still have a very big following, right?
Dissident, wrong
yeah,
thinkers, whatever you want to call them.
people,
And they don't have
people
to
who
be
just fuck up.
conservative, right? They don't have to be
Correct.
conservative.
What is conservative? I'm not conservative. I'm center right, right? Whatever the center is, you'll almost find me.
Yeah.
You'll almost certainly find me. But just a little. But because I actually want to move things. I actually want to change things, right? I'm not a far right lunatic who can't recognize the friend enemy distinction. I'm a center right person who can recognize the friend enemy distinction, right? Which I think makes me more dangerous. I just want to change things and make things a little bit better incrementally without violence, because violence is never the answer. Okay. And politics, I think, in this country, it moves at a snail's pace. So you have to create the culture that you want to live with, right? And you have to create, again, a garden, cultivate a garden, right? You have to write songs, you have to write songs that talk about, again, positive things. Personal responsibility. That's what movies used to fundamentally be about, right? About the beauty and loss of childhood, for example, like what's the movie Rosebud, where the guy loses his sleigh? I'm sorry, guys, if you haven't seen it. Citizen Kane, right? Right, Citizen Kane is a classic, but it's not a story about death and deterioration. Yeah, it's a story about one man overcome by greed. But the message is that the beauty of his childhood, the beauty of a good life, that's what he missed out on. In our era, we don't even believe that there is such a thing as a good life, right? Or such a thing as, a pure childhood or whatever, which is why we're trying to make children adults and adults children now.
Yeah.
Right? So the principle is this. Use the infrastructure, use the lawyers, use the IP experts that exist in country music now and expand it. The issue that I see with other people on the right is they want to make everything a fucking grift, and they want to make. And I'm sorry for swearing again. I think we're past 15 seconds, right? So But yeah,
you gotta. Somebody in the chat will drop a coin in the jar for your swear.
Yeah, very good. Sorry, thanks, guys. But the point is this. Lost my train of thought. The point is
you were saying that they're grifters, but you want to use the existing infrastructure.
Yeah, you have to actually work with people, right? You have to actually work with people. I think the grifters are, they do the thing that I find the hardest. Asking people for money is the thing I think is the hardest thing to do, because how could I do that? How could I ask my audience to pay for stuff? Now, if you've ever gone on the Post Millennial and you think, man, there are so many fucking advertisements, this sucks, right? That's what Jordan Peterson used to say all the time, by the way. He's like, I can't share your website. There are too many advertisements on your website. It's like, well, tough, tough shit. You know what I mean? I can't steal. I'm not going to steal or take money from my audience. So there are going to be lots of advertisements, I feel more comfortable saying, hey, you don't like these advertisements, give me money. And by the way, people would give me money. People would mail me money from like Poland. They would like just mail me $50 and a note saying I want to be tracked.
Well, they want to contribute in some way. And yeah, I have even at this live show, I forgot at the beginning to say, if you like Deprogrammed, we have a subscribe star and a locals and all of that. But I think some people, that's their way of supporting. Instead of hosting their own podcast, it's like, I'm going to support the people I like who are doing good work, or the platforms or the new businesses I like that are doing good work. The difference is when it becomes so I can't stand the manipulative, like,
Right.
I'm
You have
out
to.
here fighting for you,
Right.
and if you don't give me money, I'm on the front lines. Why aren't you supporting me with your dollars? Like, I just can't stand that stuff. Like, it
Yeah,
grosses
me,
me out.
me neither. And by the
But
way, the quality, they never emphasize quality, and that's a very big difference, right? I want high quality country music. That's also, but the country music is also the place where I can work with real professionals, professional engineers, professional songwriters, and they're based and they're all on board and we all have the same mission. Okay. So
Mhm.
I could work with professionals, right? You know, otherwise, you're working with this artist, indie artist here, this guy in a rock band, this guy who was in this huge band, but they dropped him because they're pieces of shit, and that's great. That person could be a front-facing person. That person could be an artist. But music is a team sport, right? We on the right, we love personalities. We want to tell you that it's all about one great man. But I'm here, as a, you know what I mean. Again, I'm here as a Jewish person. I'm here to say it's not only about one person; it's a community. But by the way, I also want to emphasize it's not only country, okay? But the people who are actually going to be the engineers, the people who I'm hiring as my legal representative,
Right.
the agents, the booking agencies, the promoters. You have to arrange the entire thing from start to finish. Okay, the professionals who are willing to work with me, who live in a red state, where if we have a problem with a ticket agency or we have to sue a promoter for canceling a show on us and losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, we want to sue them out of Tennessee. I don't want to have a label out of California or New York and sue them out of New York or California, right? Because that's losing. You have to play to where you can win. That's why I don't understand, like Project Veritas, for example, being in New York,
Uh,
whatever, or stuff like that, because they keep
let
getting
me
rulings against them.
let me ask you this. So when did you start Base Records? How long have you been around?
Very recently, starting in June, July, basically. So
And
very
so
recently.
if anybody's watching who's interested in this, like, first of all, for musicians, should they get in touch with you? For people who want to support, how can they support you? Speaking of money, or is it mostly about getting the word out? Or like, what kind of support do you need as a new company that wants to give a platform to non-woke musicians?
For now, the goal is this. I mean, frankly, for now, follow us on Twitter. Okay.
Okay.
I don't really, and we're also going to start collecting emails and we're going to start doing stuff like that. And that's going to be important. We're going to get that done in the next week or so. And we're also working on finalizing the site. It's not final yet. But the point is, if people want to support, first of all, I wanted to start being optimistic again. If people really want to support the right, here's something you all have to commit to with me. You have to commit to never being violent. Okay? Everybody listening to me. All right? The world could be a crazy place. There can be clear signs of deterioration in our society. But if you lash out, you are the bad guy. Okay? Number one. Listen, when we have releases, take a look at them, support them, share them with your friends. Obviously, listen and download, but ideally, they're going to be good enough that they're not necessarily going to require, that kind of support. But look, the
Yeah.
point is this: we have to win together. And some of the names we're talking to, by the way, are very, very big names who are not country, right?
Ah,
But that's the point. The other thing is, like, look, we started in June or July, and the real issue with a company is everything, if you actually want to do it properly, takes time, right?
mhm.
Everybody I hired, I have to create brand new contracts. I had to incorporate in the United States and not in Canada. I had to get another headquarters here in Tennessee, right? And not in like Delaware or whatever, right? So it's a whole administrative hellish process, but stay tuned for our big event. We're doing a wonderful, huge event this April. We're doing it with Minds,
I'm hosting
who I
your
love
event
the team. Oh yeah, hello.
April 15th. This is
That's
the one you're
right.
talking about, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
cool. Yeah, I'm
We're,
I was like, wait a minute, is he talking
there
about
you
the
go.
same one?
There you go. I figured that because that's the real thing that I'm here to plug, right? I'm really here to plug that event, April 15th in Austin. It's going to be live streamed. I think Destiny is going to be live streaming it. I think Tim Pool is also going to be live streaming it. Tim Pool is going to be playing, by the way. And then in front of Tim Pool, we're going to have some wonderful acts who are country and who are also non-country. All right. I can't see your chats, but I'm sure that not everybody's super happy about the country thing. But I do want to say, we have to come together as a family. Okay, if we have a
Yes.
common goal, you know what I mean? I wasn't into country for most of my life either, but you actually look at the songs, they're actually very lovely. They actually
Oh,
tell
I'm
stories.
super
All
into
right.
country. So my audience
Uh,
is used to, first of all, Dolly Parton's birthday just happened, which is basically a national holiday in my household.
of
Um,
course.
but the old country, man, like I love some Patsy Cline, like Johnny Cash, even Bob Wills, like the Marty Robbins, like all that's like constantly what's playing in my household. I think sometimes when people nowadays, when they hear country music, they've been, to borrow a word that you used at the beginning, they've been inoculated against country because what they know of it is modern like radio country, and
Yes.
they don't know this whole history of country had so much overlap with the blues. I mean, Hank Williams, was doing songs that blues artists were doing, and there's like a real tie in there. But anyway, I
Right.
get excited about it.
Just imagine if all you knew about hip hop was like Cardi B or
Yeah,
something like that. How
exactly.
much would you hate? Right. And so, and again, I'm not a big fan of hip hop or of rap. I'm not going to lie to you. But not that, I respect guys like Tom McDonald. Don't get me wrong. Okay. But I'm not a big fan, like, of the medium. I guess grew up listening to too much classical music. I expect a melody. I expect whatever, an arrangement. Okay. So I'm sorry. Anyway, but the point is, you're completely right, Gary. If you don't have, if you just listen to radio music, right? Because remember,
Yeah.
everything that's being put out in public right now is terrible. It's not only Netflix that sucks.
Yeah.
Radio sucks too.
Radio
Like,
sucks, and
and
yeah,
and
and the
I'm not only saying relative to when we were young or when I was young. I just mean like it's objectively bad, right? Sorry.
I agree. No, I will take a stance on music being objectively bad. I think that downward trajectory you're talking about, it all like fell off steeply in the 90s, in my opinion. After the 90s, it's just like, oh, anyway, I'm
After
putting the
Elliott
ticket.
Smith died,
Yeah, well, I hadn't thought about that, but maybe, yeah, around that time. Here, I'm
maybe.
putting the ticket link in the chat. I should have started by promoting this. So this is this event that's happening. It was just announced this week, April 15th in Austin at the Vulcan. And you can see a list here. I think I pulled up Peter Boghossian's tweet about it. Peter Boghossian's going to be there. Tim Cast, Ian Crossland, Jack Posobiec, comedians like Jamie Kilstein. I'm hosting Say Some Prayers for Me, because the people who watch know I actually have a fear of public speaking. I've been working on it. That's why I do a lot more of the
Really?
moderating and stuff. Yeah, because podcasting is different because I don't see people, and my brain is sort of like, when I can see the people, then it panics, like fight or flight. But I've gotten much better at the speaking engagements, and now it's like I view this as another step. Like, okay, and now you do this different kind of thing instead of moderating, you're hosting. But I'm very excited about it. So I'm excited to meet you in person. You guys, check this out if you're in the Texas area, or if you want to travel, you can come
Yeah.
and visit. You can eat. You don't have to stay in Austin. You can stay in real Texas and commute. So
And by the way, I will say we're in negotiations with the acts that are playing before. And I think I can announce this. I hope I'm not going to get in trouble. But Tim Pool is going to be playing live. He's going to be playing with his
cool.
band. My wife is watching the stream and she sees that I got an iced coffee, and so she's mad at me. I just want to address that. This has milk in it. All right. It's not. I'm not drinking a. Don't worry. I'll get you a coffee after I'm done. All right.
Oh,
Okay.
she's
So yeah,
upset you didn't get her one.
Yeah, but I've been on this call for like an hour and 15 minutes. It would have melted. You know what I mean? Give me a chance. Anyway, the point is, of course, I
That's
did
like
forget.
me.
I'm not gonna
If
lie. Yeah.
I'm not supposed to be drinking Red Bulls, and so if I drink a Red Bull in a stream, I feel guilty that my husband will see. so it
No,
actually
no,
keeps
it's
me
not
from
that
drinking them.
I'm not
Oh.
forbidden from drinking coffee. I just have to buy one for her too. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
I
It's my
see.
tribute. Yeah, exactly. So which is fair, you know, totally fair. You know, if you're I've been with my wife for I think like 11 years now almost. So you know, I should buy her coffee once in a while.
Congratulations.
You think? Thank you. Yeah. So anyway, but the point is that that's not since we've been married, but whatever. Anyway, the point is this. I'm sorry for mentioning her, but but yeah, but Tim Pool's going to be playing. Actually, he's going to be closing it out, and we're super
How
excited.
cool.
And then we're talking to real bona fide stars in the conservative space and in the music space, and I'm very excited about that. Of course, in show business, things take forever. And certain plans fall through. We were talking to one particular artist who I've been a huge fan of for years, and we weren't able to make that work, and that's too
Oh,
bad. But that's okay. And that's why, by the way, I'm not asking for fundraising. I'm not asking for money. Like I sold my old business, and I'm using my own money to start this business, right?
cool.
And look, listen, guys, when the music comes out, support it. But in return, I'm going to give you a good product. Okay, I'm going to give you a good product. I'm not going to be begging you for money because we're going to be making our own money. Buy tickets to the shows. Get excited for what's going to happen. Okay, it might be our first tours might be, let's say, 6 months from now. They might be a little bit sooner. They might be a little bit longer. But the fact of the matter is, when we finally start rolling, I want people to feel a little bit relieved because help is on the way, and the poets and artists of this year are going to tell us where we're moving to in 5 years from now, okay?
Yes.
And we're not going to be stuck in this bizarre, censorious hell for years and years and years and years to come. It simply has to end,
I love
okay?
your
And
optimism.
it's not going to end with violence because if you do violence, you get stuck. It gets worse, actually. It gets really bad, and you should never do that. Okay? Particularly if nobody in government supports you in the first place. And by the way, nobody in government does support a general broad center right movement now. Okay?
Yeah,
Even Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, all of these people, I trust none of them. I trust none of them.
same.
Okay? So, and nobody should. Okay? They're all just as credible as George Santos. George Santos, of course, lied about who he was. He pretended to be Jewish. He pretended to be all sorts of things, and he completely fabricated his whole story. Still got elected anyway. And guess what? That's all of them. That's how they all
Mhm.
are. Okay. So whatever. Take that and run with it. But the point is, I keep saying, but the point is, and I got to stop. What I'm trying to say is that you should be optimistic because it really can't get any worse, right?
That's a good. Why should you be optimistic? Well, how much worse could it get? I actually
Right?
think it
How much
could get
worse
a
can it
lot
get?
worse.
You know what? I don't think that it can
Okay.
because at the end of the day, we're going to see in America that yes, we don't care that much about the rest of the world anymore, and we can take care of ourselves, and we're really our international community is going to be like maybe Canada, Mexico, and probably Colombia, and like that's it. But we're going to see what's going to happen to Europe. We're going to see what's going to happen to China, especially. We're going to recoil in horror. And God willing, we're going to look internally and we're going to say, we really have a good thing going, right? We really don't
Yeah.
have as much to be upset about as we think we do. For like, even when we were talking about this trans thing, with kids, which is, of course, very upsetting, you have to remember that that's not people on our side doing it to their own children, right?
Mhm.
We feel badly about it. We wish, in the same way that we would have been against lobotomies. I would have been right there against lobotomies, right?
Foot
But
binding.
foot binding. But Nixon didn't make his whole campaign about how JFK's sister was lobotomized because that would have been crazy,
Mhm.
right? He made his policies, he made his arguments about substantive policy decisions. Nixon, a Republican, invented the EPA, all right, because that was originally intended to be a conservation agency, right, or whatever. Maybe no, I think I'm correct actually. And then he also, got us off the gold standard. He did, which maybe it's a good thing, a bad thing, who knows? Whatever. But the point is, he did real things. He normalized relations with China. He did real things. He didn't talk about bullshit culture war issues. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is, let the artists create art. Let the people who care about culture create culture. Okay. And rather than running away from the theaters and the music stadiums and the movie theaters, let's write plays, let's write symphonies, let's create movies. All right, but let's put the quality of that content first. Let's make the quality of that
Yes.
content paramount, because if we continue down this path of just complaining about how hypocritical the people in power are, because they're always going to be hypocrites, there's no point. If we're going to complain about that and we're not actually going to take action, even when we do have power, to move the needle forward, to create culture that people actually want to listen to and can appreciate objectively, if we're not able to do that and support each other, then you can't complain when you lose, because that's the mentality of a loser. And so all I'm asking, and that's why I'm also saying, let's just be a little bit optimistic. Let's smile. Let's dance. Let's create beautiful things together. That's my
I love
message.
that. I love that. I'm going to put this up. So right now, the best thing you can do to support Base Records is go give them a follow on Twitter. They also have a channel. I saw you have a channel here on YouTube. We link that below in the description, so you guys can follow them there. But go check them out on Twitter. Pay attention to what they have upcoming. If you're in the Austin area, come out to this event on April 15th. And Matthew, it's been very, very cool getting to talk to you. I really appreciate the conversation. It gave me a lot to think about. I do want to hear, if you have time, quickly, what's your Lost rant?
Oh yeah, my Lost rant. Okay, so my rant about Lost is my rant about J.J. Abrams, and basically we live in the era of big things are coming, right? Big things are coming. Lost is really going to pay off. Crypto is really going to pay off. AI is totally going to happen, right? The Star Wars reboot is going to be awesome, right? Big promises, even promises that are frankly not so big. Like, how do you fuck up Star Wars or whatever, right? Or how do you, right? But we live in the era of constant hype. And Lost was really the first show to perpetuate this idea of hype and to never fucking deliver on anything at all. Okay? And by the way,
what? We're going to disagree. Did you not like the ending? I liked it.
You liked it? Not at all. Terrible. And by the way, Netflix does this, even Netflix is doing this now, where I don't know if you saw this, The Watcher. They had this show on Netflix. Every fucking episode was an hour and a half. And then there was an ending, and the ending didn't even resolve the story.
I did see it. Okay, I agree with you there. That did not pay off. That was a terrible ending. Yes.
No payoff.
Yeah.
No payoff. Right? And so, in my opinion, Lost did not really give the payoff that was promised. Right? Game of Thrones, by the way, another great example. Game of Thrones. George R.R. Martin criticizes Tolkien, criticizes all high fantasy, writes this way overwrought, like long and complicated story that can never be resolved, can never hope to be resolved. And in that way, he actually captured our era in the way that Tolkien captured his era. Okay? He made a really long, fucking overwrought political treatise that can never end. It'll end when he dies, and it'll go unfinished. Because that's the story. That's like Sam Bankman-Fried, for example, right?
He can't wrap it up.
You can't wrap it up. Nobody can fucking seal the deal, okay? Everybody wants to raise money. Silicon Valley. Everyone's raising money. How many of these companies ever become profitable? Maybe a handful, and it's not related to the original premise of their business. As an example, Amazon. Amazon's only profitable. I don't even know if it still is, but it was only profitable because of AWS, Amazon Web Service. The actual retail side of their business, complete shit. And J.J. Abrams and his ascendancy in pop culture is some kind of paragon of incredible fucking artistic virtue. It's so symbolic of our age of mediocrity, overhyped, promising big shit and never delivering. And that's why people could say, "Oh, Matthew, this doesn't sound exciting, country musically, blah, 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 blah." Listen, I'm not promising you that we're going to storm the Bastille. Okay, I'm not promising you 1776. I'm promising you a bunch of really good records with a bunch of really solid songs and productions, and I'm actually just going to do it. And the miracle is it will happen. I promise a thing, it will happen. I won't ask any fucking money from you. I'm not going to waste your time by talking about insubstantial nonsense. Okay? We're going to actually just do simple things and actually just do them, okay? Like the Lord of the Rings relative to fucking Song of Ice and Fire. Like I never even started reading a Song of Ice and Fire because I thought it was bullshit. You know what I mean? From the beginning, the whole thing is just nonsense. You don't start a television show based on a book that can never end, but they chose to do that anyway, right? That's art. That's capital. That's how things like marriage and divorce. People get married to divorce now. People don't wrap things up. Sorry. Anyway, that's my rant.
No, I don't agree with you about the ending of Lost, but I appreciate your rant. I appreciate the point you're making. And I can agree with you maybe on some other things like The Walking Dead. They can't wrap it up. And it really fell off.
The Walking Dead, but the actual graphic novel was amazing. And
I loved
it really well.
I haven't finished the graphic novel, so that gives me hope. People agree with you, by the way. Look at this. You guys, they're turning on me in the chat. They're all like, the Lost ending was disappointing. Hell, chat.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I totally agree, by the way. Well, hail me, all right? Because I'm pointing this out. And I want us all to unite around the fact. Listen, J.J. Abrams completely overrated, overhyped. His, like everybody said he was a genius for that Star Trek reboot. Basically, people said, "Oh, he's so great. He could do like one movie with a complete plot."
What
about he could do a movie?
A movie. What about David Lynch? Did you feel that way about Twin Peaks? Did you ever watch Twin Peaks back in the day? Because a lot of people said he didn't pay off. It never.
But the point of that is to be conceptual, right? Mm-hmm. The point, nobody said David Lynch. I mean, well, I guess people think they do think he's kind of a genius. I mean, if you've ever seen his Dune movie version, then maybe not so much. Like nobody's perfect, okay? But well, Twin Peaks was also like he had to do a recut. He had a lot of hurdles to overcome. J.J. Abrams has had like hundreds of millions of dollars thrown at every project that he's been involved in, and it all failed when he wrote the fucking script. So it's not even, it's not even like the guy is he's not a con artist because the movies actually happen. But, from an audience perspective, from a narrative perspective, he's essentially conning you into believing that there's a coherent story when in fact there is none. Which is by I know you probably have crypto enthusiasts on the chat. That's
That's what you think crypto is too?
Yeah, fundamentally. Wow. Fundamentally it is.
We disagree on a lot, but we agree on the important things. So that's why I like talking to you, I think. Well, Matthew, thank you for hanging out with us on Deprogram today. I'm very excited about Bass Records. You guys go give them a follow on Twitter. And again, if you're in the Austin, Texas area, April 15th at the Vulcan, there's a big Minds event. Bass Records is sponsoring with them. And it's going to be a little different than the last Minds event in New York, because this one is not just panels with different people having conversations. It's also music and comedy. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much, Matthew.
Thanks you guys. Much, Carrie. A real pleasure.
Now comes the awkward moment where I didn't have the ad pulled up. Here we go. Here's my silly ad. Bye.
Take a look at the ad, guys. Bye.
Thank you to today's sponsor, the Church on the Square of Georgetown, Texas, which happens to be my church. My church is no longer allowed to advertise on Facebook, which is unfortunate because that's how I and a lot of other church members originally found them. They've been told that they violate community standards. There's no details there of what that means, but you guys know the score. Anyway, since they're not allowed to advertise,